Please state your name for the record." The man in tattered boots and a frayed coat lifted his gaze from the defense table. He didn't waver, didn't tremble. He simply said, 2 words, measured and slow. The judge's eyes flicked to the name on the file. Then she set her pen aside and rose. In a courtroom hushed to silence, she walked out, not uttering another word. If that sent shivers down your spine, comment respect for the unsung warriors who never needed to shout to be etched in memory. Monday mornings in Judge Clara Thornton's courtroom followed a predictable rhythm. A parade of weekend arrests, petty thefts, minor infractions demanded endless patience. The fluorescent lights buzzed above, bathing everyone in the same harsh glow. The room wasn't cold. The heater worked almost too well. Yet a chill hung in the air, the mechanical grind of processing lives reduced to case numbers, not stories. Next on the docket, the clerk called, shuffling papers with practiced ease. Case 247B. A few heads turned as the bailiff announced the name, though most stayed glued to phones or murmured side conversations. The regulars, public defenders, prosecutors, court reporters, barely glanced up. Just another faceless figure, another slot in the day's lineup. But something about this man made the bailiff pause as he approached. Maybe it was the mismatched layers of clothing, odd in the warm courtroom. Maybe it was the faraway look in eyes that seemed to see beyond this space, somewhere distant. He moved forward slowly, not with hesitation, but with the deliberate pace of someone who knew haste changed nothing. His boots were worn thin at the edges, laces swapped for what looked like knotted plastic bag strips. A beard, more gray than brown, hid most of his face. His hands, emerging from tattered sleeves, were rough and weathered. He carried the scent of rain, asphalt, and long nights outside. Not the sharp tang of alcohol common among Monday defendants, but the earthier smell of someone who slept beneath the sky, not a roof. "Please take a seat," the bailiff directed, motioning to the defense table. The man nodded once and sat, his movements precise, intentional. No wasted motion, no excess effort. Judge Thornton glanced at the file, thinner than most, just a single sheet with handwritten notes. No ID provided, no background check completed, only a name scrawled in penmanship too neat for the man's ragged appearance. "Charges, unlawful camping in a public space," she read, eyes still on the page. "Third warning this year." The public defender, young and swamped with cases, stepped forward. "Your Honor," he began, "my client has declined shelter placements. He's not talkative. We suspect he's former military, based on a tattoo noted during intake, though he hasn't confirmed it." Judge Thornton exhaled, a sound of someone bracing for another lap in a race of small infractions. She'd seen men like him before, veterans who couldn't adapt, who found walls suffocating after years of constant alertness, who chose open dangers over hidden ones in crowded rooms. "Let's keep this moving," she said, pen ready. "Sir, please state your name for the record." The courtroom hummed with its usual low activity. A prosecutor sorted papers. A court officer glanced at his watch. The court reporter's fingers poised over her stenotype, waiting. For the first time since entering, the man lifted his eyes. They were strikingly blue against his sun-worn skin, not the empty gaze of someone lost to drugs or madness, but sharp, present, oddly out of place with his disheveled state. He met Judge Thornton's gaze, steady and unshaken. There was no defiance, no challenge, just a quiet dignity that seemed to straighten his posture even as he sat. Then he spoke, his voice low but clear, resonating through the room. "Thomas Brennan." Just 2 words, delivered slowly, each syllable heavy with unspoken weight. The room didn't stir. Names were routine, mere data for forms. But Judge Clara Thornton froze. Her pen, poised to write, halted. She reached for the file again, her hands unsteady. The bailiff, who'd worked with her for 7 years, had never seen her falter. The name on the intake form, Thomas Brennan, matched the one just spoken. Not a rare name, but not remarkably unique. Yet Judge Thornton stared at it, as if it were written in fire, not ink. Her face paled, as if a specter had stepped through the courtroom walls. Because, in a way, one had. 15 years ago, Clara Thornton wasn't a judge. She was a young law clerk for a federal judge handling a classified military tribunal, a case so sensitive that armed guards flanked every entrance. Testimonies were given behind screens, names erased from records. All records but one. A single affidavit had crossed her desk by error, one she was never meant to see. She'd memorized its signature, knowing she'd never speak of it, Thomas Brennan. It wasn't just a name. It was a code, a designation for a mission that officially never happened. Her mind raced. Coincidence, identity theft, or was it truly him? The man whose testimony she'd transcribed in a secure room, whose words were instantly classified beyond top secret. She muttered, so softly only the bailiff heard, "That can't be him." The bailiff leaned in. "Judge, is everything okay?" She didn't respond. Instead, she studied the man before her. Beneath the beard and gaunt cheeks, could it be the same face? The eyes, yes, those blue eyes, so jarring against the horrors he'd described in that other courtroom long ago. The public defender shifted, uneasy in the prolonged silence. "Your Honor, shall we proceed with the charges?" But Judge Thornton wasn't listening. Her mind was 15 years back, recalling snippets of testimony about covert extractions in places American troops supposedly never tread, about impossible choices and sacrifices that could never be claimed. She remembered the voice, the oath, the way he'd stood tall despite shackles. Thomas Brennan wasn't just a man facing petty charges on a Monday. He was a phantom, abandoned by a system he'd served. "Your Honor?" the prosecutor prompted, puzzled by the pause. But Judge Thornton had decided. She removed her glasses with careful precision. The thin frames glinted under the lights as she folded them and set them beside her gavel. Her hands, the court reporter noted, trembled faintly. She clasped them tightly, knuckles white, and looked at the man who called himself Thomas Brennan, seeing past the worn clothes and hardship to something deeper. "Mr. Brennan," she said, her voice softer now, not the brisk tone of a judge churning through cases, but something raw, human. "I'm dismissing this case." A ripple of surprise ran through the courtroom. The prosecutor sat up, confused. The public defender blinked, unsure if he'd heard correctly. Brennan tilted his head slightly. "Why?" The single word carried no gratitude, no relief, just honest confusion, as if mercy was more suspect than judgment. Judge Thornton's reply was quiet but clear, reaching every corner of the now silent room. "Because I don't belong behind this bench. Not when you're standing before it." She stood, an unusual move mid-session. The motion was sharp enough that the bailiff stepped forward, uncertain. "Your Honor," the prosecutor began, half standing. Judge Thornton turned to her clerk. "Strike these charges. Expunge all records tied to this case immediately." The prosecutor found his voice. "Judge Thornton, with respect, this is unprecedented. The defendant has multiple violations of the same code. There are procedures." She silenced him with a gesture, more soldier than judge. "Do you know who he is, counselor? A vagrant with repeated breaches of Municipal Code 15.3. The prosecutor gestured to his notes. "Wrong." Her voice snapped like a gavel, though she hadn't touched it. She pointed at Brennan, still seated, his face unreadable beneath the beard. This man led covert search and rescue missions through enemy territory in 2004. He lost half his team to evacuate an embassy that was never officially at risk. And he signed a non-disclosure that doesn't expire until 2085. The courtroom's silence deepened. Even the heater's hum seemed to fade. The prosecutor's confidence wavered. How could you know that? Judge Thornton reached into her personal briefcase, not the one holding the day's files. With steady hands, she pulled out a slim black folder, the only keepsake from her clerkship days. Not the contents, locked away in a secure facility, but the folder itself, marked with a distinct symbol. "Because I was there," she said softly, "when he testified in a room swept for bugs 3 times daily. I was there when he described saving 37 American lives while in chains, because the mission was disavowed." She set the folder on the bench, a sign only she and Brennan would recognize. This man was failed by the system he defended. "I won't add to that failure." The prosecutor had no reply. The public defender looked at his client anew, seeing him clearly for the first time. Thomas Brennan stood slowly, his posture shifting, shoulders squaring. The change was subtle but striking, like a man stepping back into a long-discarded uniform. "I didn't come here for favors, Judge," he said, his voice heavy with authority despite his appearance. "And you're not getting one," she replied without pause. "You're getting overdue respect, and this court gets a chance to do right for once." With that, she stepped down from the bench, not toward her chambers, but straight toward the courtroom's main doors. She paused briefly beside Brennan, words passing too quietly for others to hear. Then she continued, pushing through the doors without a backward glance. For a moment, no one moved. The courtroom's relentless machinery had ground to a halt. Then the bailiff, a 20-year veteran, stood at attention. The court reporter followed, rising. One by one, everyone stood, a silent tribute that transcended rank or protocol. They stood for the man who'd stood for them when it counted most. Thomas Brennan walked out into the sharp winter morning. The sun stung his eyes after the courtroom's dim light. He squinted, adjusting his worn cap, a habit from years when hiding features could mean survival. The street buzzed with Monday's rhythm, office workers with coffee, cars vying at the intersection. No one noticed another homeless man leaving the courthouse, whether freed or condemned. But a car waited, black, unmarked, windows tinted just enough to obscure its occupants. It had been there for exactly 17 minutes. As Brennan descended the steps, the rear door opened. A man in a dark blue uniform stepped out. No insignia, no name tag, but his bearing screamed military. "Sir," he said, voice low. "It's time." Brennan stopped, his weathered face betraying nothing. "Time for what?" "For you to stop vanishing." The man's tone was respectful but firm. "We've been searching for you since Algeria, 3 years ago." A flicker crossed Brennan's face. Recognition, perhaps, or exhaustion. "We've prepared a place," the man continued. "Quiet, private. You won't be disturbed. But we need your expertise one last time." The answer's still no. "Sir, with respect, things have changed. What happened in '04 has been revisited at the highest levels." Brennan stood still, weighing unseen options, calculating as he had in mountains, deserts, and jungles where mistakes meant unmarked graves. Finally, he nodded once. A choice made. He slid into the car without another word. The door shut. The vehicle melted into traffic and vanished. Another ghost returning to the shadows where the nation's vital work unfolds. An hour after her abrupt exit, Judge Clara Thornton returned to courtroom 3. The docket had been reassigned. The room was empty. She carried her judicial robe, neatly folded. With measured steps, she walked to the clerk's office and placed an envelope on the desk. Her resignation, effective immediately. "May I ask why, Your Honor?" the clerk asked, genuinely upset. Judge Thornton was respected, efficient, just. She gave a faint smile that didn't touch her eyes. Because justice can be served in different ways. I was reminded of that today. The court didn't understand. Rumors swirled of breakdowns, ethical breaches, hidden illnesses. None touched the truth. But that week, maintenance workers installed a new plaque in the courthouse hallway. No ceremony, no explanation. It simply appeared, brass letters gleaming in the morning light. To those who served where records do not reach, and still bear what history will not write. Some said Judge Thornton ordered it before leaving. Others claimed it came from the governor's office. A few swore they saw a man in uniform overseeing its installation before dawn. The truth, like much in a world of shadows and service, stayed classified. But the plaque endured, a tribute to silent sacrifices, to debts never publicly repaid, to heroes who seek nothing, not even remembrance. Because some stories are written not in records, medals, or headlines, but in the quiet pauses between a nation's heartbeats, safe in the ignorance of its guardian's vigilance. Share stories of steel, for some heroes never cease to serve.